Hello again. Welcome to another 52 financial biblical keys video. Video conversation that Tina and I have been having for, I don't know, we've probably been getting on for a year now of videos, which is great fun and really challenging and inspirational as well, certainly from my end. And I hope that those of you who are joining in with us, listening in, watching, are gaining encouragement and inspiration from this. Tina, it'd be probably good for us to remind everyone where we're from. We occasionally do this on these videos, kind of as we put them out, just to kind of give some context. So why don't you kind of just remind everyone where this has come from, this idea of doing this, and and your context a little bit.
Oh gosh, so probably about a year, 15 months ago, in my time with the Lord in the morning, I was asking God about what was coming up and how to pray for people. And I felt God say to me that things were going to get tough for people, particularly around austerity, things being financially tight. And I'd already had a prophetic word that at some point I would be doing more online. And I'll be honest, whilst I understand the value of it, it's not something that I find necessarily easy. I think it's been more of a learned behavior, be fair to say. And so I really have been waiting for God's timing on this and his leading on it. And he downloaded about 52, well, more than now, principles, financial principles for being able to gain financial breakthrough for people. And you and I were having a conversation one day, weren't we, Mark? And I think I said something along the line of, I need to find someone to do it with. I'm sure you wouldn't want to do it with me. And you pretty much said, yes, I would. And so that was it really, wasn't it? Yeah. And since then we've been conversing around this topic, many weeks. And where am I? I'm in God's own country, as the Yorkshire people like to talk about Yorkshire. As you can see, I'm not originally from Yorkshire. You can probably hear that in my accent. But Yorkshire's often spoken of by the locals as God's own country. So that's where I'm in South Yorkshire, just where the border of South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire meet, near to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, in a converted church that it's had a Christian presence on this spot since the 6th century, the records show. Missionaries used to come to this space and bring a cross and preach the gospel. And then later there was records of a church, a wooden church, and then various churches, and they've all been on this spot. And I'm today speaking from the base of the tower, which is the oldest part of the building, which is where we have our ministry headquarters. So called Eagles Retreat at All Hallows, otherwise known as Eagles Rest Retreat on Facebook. So you can find us there. So our passion not just is about retreat, though, it's about helping those believers within the church to be able to step with confidence and courage into their calling and to help equip people to be able to do that better. But our website details are there. You can see the other things that we do. I know that you're northern as well, Mark, at the moment, aren't you? Although you're based in Bridlington, your network is also like mine, not just localized to Bridlington, is it?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm the east of Yorkshire, so on the coast, and we are, we've got a kind of sense of vision for the coastlands, especially. In fact, I'm heading up shortly up to Scarborough to pray with some other leaders across churches and ministry areas with a coastlands kind of focus, and it's a very beautiful place to live, and definitely God's here.
Yeah,
and where you are.
well, this is it. Like it's a cheeky phrase, isn't it? God's own country. But we'll just take that as the whole of the UK, God's own country. So
Absolutely,
we know that these things are worldwide, and that a lot of the networks and where we're placed, often our networks start from where we are, but they can be international, can't they?
Absolutely.
And so wherever you are in the world, if you're watching this, I'm sure that's God's own country as well. So don't feel left out. You're not left out.
Great. So we're on key number 30.
Yes.
And that's going to be to do with developing a limitless mindset, or another way of putting it is limiting God.
Not limiting God, yeah. Making sure that we don't limit him. Yeah.
Yeah. So, take us into this, Tina.
Well, I was reading a passage in Hebrews 6 one morning, and it was talking about with God's enablement, we'll move into deeper truths. And I think so much of the church we talk about milk, don't we, in the church? In other words, we're on the superficial things, the things when we first became believers. We're not getting our teeth into those meatier things, those things that take a little bit more understanding and digesting. And it was talking about progressing in Hebrews 6 beyond the basic message of Christ, so that we're not just preaching about Christ, we're actually preaching about how to become like Christ. In other words, advancing into perfection is how the Passion Translation puts it. But the way that we limit God, particularly, it can be in a number of ways. We can limit God in prayer, for example, when we're satisfied with our own lot and we decide not to pray for others. So, when people say, can I pray for you? I will always think of something or someone to pray for. It may not always be me, but we need to think more like the way God does. So when we're satisfied with our own lot, what we've got, people will pray often for just enough to pay the bills. Well, that's not developing a limitless mindset. We need to pray that actually God blesses us so abundantly that we can more than meet our bills and have plenty to help others meet their bills. So that we recognize that is part of God, is that limitless nature is part of God. He doesn't just give us enough. Look at the feeding of the 5,000. There were 12 baskets left over, weren't there? So you could have had another few thousand there. But that was to illustrate that what God wants to give us is always more than we're asking for. So we need to make sure that what we're asking for is what God wants to give us, and that we have both the mindset and the capacity in our heart to be able to receive it. So let's not get satisfied with just our own lot. Let's not be ignorant of the Bible and God's ways, because if we don't know God and we don't understand his ways, we're going to think that actually we're just going to have enough. So in fact, Jasper was saying, we were putting some petrol or something in the car, and he said, oh, that was it, we were shopping yesterday. He went into Aldi, I went into Asda, because we needed different things from there, and we both literally, we had £80 that we needed to spend food. It couldn't be any more, and literally it came to just that. And he said, oh, isn't that God? And I was thinking, yes, but God is so much more than that. Yes, he meets our needs, but he's so much more than that. And I don't want to limit God. We also limit God when we doubt that what he says is the case, or what he says is true. And when we let unbelief in, we've just looked at unbelief, and when we get into fear. So in all those ways, we can limit God. And we don't want to be like the children of Israel. We want to make sure that we're wise and we understand what God's will is. It says in Ephesians 5:17, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Well, that's what we need to be praying. Lord, what's your will here? So, years ago, when I was in a time of exhaustion, the Lord pretty much told me it was my own fault. And he said, the problem is you're dealing with it, you're not bringing it to me. So bring everything that people bring to you to me first. Listen to what I say and then respond. So some things he'd say, give more. Other things he'd say, give less. But I tell you, one of the things I noticed straight away is his capacity was not the same as mine. Mm. And so because he said so, we were able to do and give so much more. So I want to encourage us not to be limited in our thinking. It talks about in Corinthians, whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, do it in a way that brings glory to God and honors him. And so, going back to the story we were talking about earlier, where the disciples were unpacking with Jesus, why is it that we couldn't deal with this man with his son who was really poorly? And Jesus said it was because of your unbelief. And he went on to say, if you had faith like a mustard seed, you'd say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. Well, that is where I'm aiming for. I don't know about you, Mark. I want there to be nothing that's impossible for me, because, God even had to tell Moses who, fabulously, led the children of Israel out of the oppression, the slavery that they had in Egypt. Even God had to say to him, has my arm been shortened? Has it suddenly got short that I don't have the power or ability, in other words, to do what I've just told you is going to happen? He said in Numbers 11:23, you'll see whether or not and what I'm saying is going to happen or not. And so we need to stay in that place of real deep, trusting belief that doesn't have any ends, sides, or bottom or height to it. We need to keep it as fluid and as elastic as possible.
Yeah,
that's what the principle is anyway. But
yeah,
does that make sense?
It does. And you say there's something about not settling for less.
Absolutely.
There's something about the way in which sometimes circumstances can exert a kind of power,
yeah,
that limits us, and to acknowledge that and to recognize that, and to live into a kind of a relationship with God that is about his power to overcome those limits. And
yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've been known to say when we are in a pickle or there's, something that just looks like it could, we laugh about it sometimes, how things couldn't get any worse. And I've learned to say, I can't wait to see what you're going to do here, Lord. This is, in other words, I don't want to limit you with my words, but I'm excited and I'm looking with anticipation and expectation, because you're right, circumstances do squeeze us. And in fact, I'm reminded of the Message translation about it says, don't let the world squeeze you into its mold. Yeah. And it's always trying to do that, a bit like a baby caught in a birth canal. We're being pushed, as it were, one way when actually God's trying to pull us another way. You made me smile when you said about not settling for less, because my tagline for my coaching used to be helping people not to settle for less than what they're worth. Right. And that's because in the journeying that I've made with God is that I went from settling for the least to actually I'm really hard to please now, or at least in God I'm hard to please. I'll know whether or not something has God's presence, if this is of God, because it will be shouting blessing in every way. And I'm not trying to be just prosperity gospel. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm talking. I had a friend, for example, who wanted to come and move nearby. I still have a friend, by the way. She's still a friend. And she was looking for a house. She had a great house where she was, and what we wanted to do was transport what she had from there to here, but it was another county. And so when we were looking, there wasn't really the options for what she was looking for, and she ended up putting an offer in on another, and I was so dissatisfied in my spirit. I felt, yes, it ticks the basic boxes, but just the bare minimum. Is it within striking distance? Yes, it's 2 miles down the road. She'd have to walk uphill every day. It's on a main road. She loves the countryside. She wants a dog. It's going to be hard, to keep the dog in the garden, and there's a main road there. And all these things, I just was so dissatisfied. And in the end, I turned around to her and I said, you know how much we love you. This just doesn't feel like it's got God's favor on it. It doesn't look like God. If it was God, it would look different. And so, long story short was she pulled out. Bless her, she had the courage to pull out, and we prayed and just were pressed into, Lord, where do you want her? And she's ended up slightly further away, very easy distance, right at the top of a hill. Bungalow right at the top of this estate, has a great view over the valley to pray. Great place for taking a dog just around the estate briefly, or there's fields at the bottom of the road. It's easy to come up here. All of those other things fitted beautifully. So if it's of God, we can't limit him by settling for less. As soon as we start to settle for less, we'll get it. So, sometimes I've paid for a room. We've been going to stay somewhere, and I'm a great believer in being thankful in all circumstances. But like, I went to one place in Dubai. They hadn't even changed the bed sheets from the previous people. And they threw the sheets at me, expecting me to change it. And I said, that ain't going to happen. I'm going to sleep in the chair. I said to Jasper, I've paid for a room, a good money for the room. I expect to have clean sheets. And so we need to make sure that the basics of what it is that we feel God is saying that he's wanting to give us, that we're getting. And if it doesn't have that about it, it's not God. Yeah. When it is God, it's got favor everywhere, absolutely everywhere. We went to stay just before Christmas. We were staying in what was it called? A Marriott. We stayed in a Marriott one night. We were taking my mother down to see her friend who'd had a stroke down to Kent. And so we stayed in a Marriott one night, and we went down for breakfast, and we asked about, do we pay for breakfast separate? Do we pay for it with the bill? And the woman said, we're not going to charge you for breakfast at all. And we'd had like one of these mega breakfasts, all you can eat buffet type thing. And I thought, wow. And we hadn't paid more than £60 for the night. And I couldn't believe it. Well, I could believe it. When you keep saying, that's the other thing, when you're constantly saying, I don't believe it, you're limiting God. And you've heard me say before, I've come out from underneath people who were constantly speaking that over me, because that's not the culture I'm trying to create. Go for it. I believe. Yeah, go for it. I'm standing with you in faith. All of that kind of thing. We need to make sure that we're aligning ourselves with the limitlessness of God. I used to say the sky's the limit, and I say, no, the universe is the limit. Yeah. There is no limit in God.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really crucial mindset to have in regard to finances and provision and those kind of things, isn't it? Because we do have this tendency to set the limits and to believe the bottom lines that we're being told, and there's something really crucial about not settling for less.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, I hope those of you who've been watching this live or are watching it in the aftermath are able to be encouraged and inspired, that you'll also put any comments or reflections or testimonies in the comments. Thing that we've got open on this. Thanks so much, Tina. It's been really good to do these couple of videos today, and we've got more scheduled to come shortly. So look forward to joining you and having more conversations around 52 financial biblical keys.
Thanks, Mark. Always enjoy talking about a topic that's so close to my heart. Lovely to see you, Mark. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.